Alright, now there are lots of ways that we could do this, apply the joints, but I'm going to do it a specific way because I found this to just be, it works the best. There are less errors as I go through the process. So if you need to pause this and go back and make sure you're doing it this same way, I think it will really be helpful and you'll be able to get your pig done a lot faster. Okay, now we are not covering we're just barely scraping the surface with joints. There are a lot of things that will improve your rigs if you know more about joints, but for this assignment and for this project, and for this class, we're just going to keep it simple so that we can get things done quicker. Okay? So when you're plotting joints, you need to do it again in these 4 views. So I'm going to consider just a little bit about his anatomy or about a skeleton structure in general. So when I go to plot the arms, I'm going to start at the shoulder and go shoulder, and then I'm going to move slightly back to create the elbow, and then I'm going to come slightly forward again to create the wrist, and then press Y. I'll come over to the other side, shoulder, elbow, wrist, press Y. Okay, now I need to switch to the perspective view because it has placed the joints on the floor. Okay, so I just need to select these joints, and move them up inside of our character. Okay, now if you can't see the joints like this, there's a button right here called the X-ray joint tool view. It makes it so that they're see-through. If this was turned off, you would need to be in wireframe to see it. Okay, so go back to our textured one. I can press 5, and now I just see the shaded, or the model. Okay, so when you place your joint, now we need to look at the wireframe of my model, which I'm going to press this blue and white button. And I need to see that the joint is lined up where I would want this to bend from. So this joint, and your model will only bend where there's vertices. So it will only bend here and it won't bend here. So I'm going to just make sure it's lined up there. I'm going to switch to a front view. And that's lined up against, okay, so this could come out a little more so that it's bending along this edge. Then this one, I need to move in. Okay, when you edit your joints, you need to use the move tool to get them into position, and that way we don't have any rotation in them. So if you wanted, like if I wanted this to be bent down a little like this, now if I've done it with the rotate tool, now I have rotation in there. So we don't want that. If you want it to have that slight bend to follow the arm, then you select the next joint down, use the move key and move it down. Okay, so now that it's lined up how we want it, the next step we do is we go through it and we make sure that the rotation is out on all of these. Rotation 0, that's what I mean, 0, 0, 0. Okay, then I go to skeleton, orient joint. Okay, and now they should follow down the arm. I can check it by rotating it. Looks nice. Then it'll rotate out like a arm should. Okay, next I'll move over to the other arm. Okay, I'm going to switch to the front view by tapping the space bar. Then I'm going to move it out and down so that it's lined up with this section. My elbow is this edge loop here, and then my wrist here. Okay, I'm going to move them slightly down, still just using the move tool. Then I check that they are all 0 in the rotation, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0, 0, 0. Now I select the parent joint, then go to skeleton, orient joint. Okay, so now when I rotate this, it's going to go down that arm. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is select this last joint and change its joint orient to 0. 0, 0. Okay, so now it follows the way that it follows the parent. So it will rotate, it points out down the arm. Okay, I forgot to do that over here, so I select this end joint, change this to 0, and this to 0. Okay, now the next joints I'm going to do is the leg joint. So I can switch to a side view and go to the joint tool, and I want to go start with the hip, go slightly forward with the knee, and then back to the ankle. Okay, I'm going to go into the front view now, and I need to press W to select the joint and move it out. I'm going to use this line here to line it up so it'll bend there. I'm just going to keep this straight down even though my ankle comes in a little, but I do want to move this one up and this one up slightly. Okay, select the parent joint, go to skeleton, orient joints, then I need to change my last joint, orient to 0, 0, 0. Okay, now I'm going to look at this in the 3D view, in the perspective window. Okay, now this knee is probably over exaggerated. I'm going to change that. If I want to change this, move it in closer, I need to hold down D, which changes the pivot point back. So there, and I'm also going to move this one, which this one I can just use with the move tool. And that looks good. If I make this change now, when I go to rotate this, it's not going to rotate correctly. So now I need to select the joints again, the parent, and go to skeleton, orient joint. See, now it popped into place, and now when I rotate this, it works good. Okay, now with the legs, and this will only work with the legs, I could select this joint, press Control D as in dog, and now I have duplicated it, and I can move it across to the other side. Okay, the next joint that we want to create is the pelvis joint. These are the hips, and we want a joint here for the pelvis so that we can move both our hips at once if we'd like. So I'm going to go to the front view, pick the joint tool, and I'm going to place it right here. Okay, and press enter. The joint orient's okay. The rotations are out. Oh, we didn't double check the rotation on the legs. Rotation is 0. Rotation is 0. Okay, and that should be the same for this other side. Okay, now we can connect the legs to this pelvis. So to do this, we first select the joint, the child, then we shift select the parent and press P. Okay, so the pelvis is the leader and it's controlling the hips. So select first the child, shift select the parent, and press P. If we've gone the wrong way and this arrow is facing the wrong way, you can change that by selecting the child and pressing Shift P, and that will unparent it. Say for example I selected this first as a child, then this as a parent, and press P. This bone is pointing the wrong direction. So this one's going to follow this one. This one is, if I rotate this, all of these joints are going to move. So this is wrong, so I'm going to press Shift P. Now on this one, it's the child, so Shift P, and then I select the parent, select the child, then Shift select the parent, and press P. Okay, the next joint chain we're going to create is the spine. Okay, and we're going to create a center of gravity joint, because this is where our pig will rotate from, then a lower back, then a lower back here, then an upper back here, and then a neck and a head joint. So I'm going to do that from the side. so I can give it a little bit of rotation like a spine would have. Oh, and I've just noticed my pelvis joint I forgot to move forward. So we'll fix that in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to place my center of gravity, then my lower back, undo. I'm going to go, oops, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to try it again. Okay, I'm going to press the Y to bring up the tool again, or I could just select the joint tool here. So I go center of gravity, lower back, upper back, neck, and head. So I'm moving the head just slightly forward because that's typically how your bone structure works. Then there's a slight bend here. Okay, now you might think that this distance between the neck and the back is a lot. Well, in here we have a rib cage, and our rib cage doesn't move very much, so I'm trying to simulate that by the amount of space I put between my joints. Okay, now we need to fix this pelvis joint. Sorry for putting it back there, so I'm just going to select the hip, press Shift P. I'll go to the front view, select the other hip, press Shift P. Okay, now I'd like the center point joint, center of gravity joint, and the pelvis joint to be in the same place. So to distinguish between the two, I'm going to change the size of this pelvis joint. I'm going to select it, and underneath in here we have the radius. I'm just going to change that to 2, and that will make it a lot bigger. Okay, now if I select the pelvis joint and hold down D, I can change its location, but if I hold down V, it will now snap to a vertice, so it's snapping to these vertices, and it will also snap to a joint center. So right there is the center of my center of gravity joint. To check that, I'm going to go to my perspective view, and I can see that these two joints are in the same place. Okay, now that they're in the same place, make sure that this pelvis joint has no rotation in it, and now I can parent back my hips. So I select first the hip, then the pelvis, and press P. Okay, now I need to finish making sure that this other joint chain is correct by just selecting the center of gravity, going to skeleton, orient joints. Okay, they're all lined up how I'd like them. Okay, except, and I'm going to leave the head even though it has orientation in it. Actually, I'm going to first change this to 0. Okay, and now if you can see, it's making it so that this joint is slightly bent down, and that will make it so that when we rotate our head, it's going to be tilted slightly down. So I just want to make that straight, and it just needs to be eyeballed. So I'm going to hold down Control and click inside of the Z box here and drag it until it's straight. Now, holding Control and clicking in here sometimes is a good method, but this is going a little slow, so I'm going to just manually push in a number. 15, it's not enough. 20, so I'm looking for this to be parallel to the floor, basically. So 21, okay, that looks good. Okay, so now that these joint chains are all oriented and placed properly inside of my skeleton, I can connect them all. So I'm going to select the shoulder, then Shift select the chest, and press P. Select the other shoulder, Shift select the chest, and press P. And then finally select the pelvis, which is the small one in here, Shift select the center of gravity joint, and press P. Okay, and because these two joints are in the same location, it doesn't know where to put this bone. So it just sticks it on the side, or maybe in yours it's stuck it below. But these are just the bones, and it doesn't matter where they go. Okay, so now my character has all of the joints in the right place, and it's all connected. If I select the center of gravity joint, it looks like it selects them all, and it will move just the whole skeleton. Okay, so the next step we want to do is go through and rename all of these joints, because it will get confusing when we select this joint and it's called joint 1. We need to make it called left shoulder joint. Okay, then this will be the left elbow joint, and then the left hand. Okay, this will be the head, neck, I'm calling this upper back, and lower back, and center of gravity, no spaces in the names. And then in here I'm going to name this pelvis, and so on. So we have hips, knees, ankles. Okay, so go through and rename all of those joints, and then we can move on to the next step.